But please give a quick warm welcome to Bruce Leininger.
First of all, it's a privilege and it's quite humbling to be here. Most of you folks are much further along than I am in terms of your spiritual journey, much more spiritually mature maybe than I am. For some of you that are neophytes and scared out of your wits, welcome to my club. What you're going to hear about was a scary journey, but the first thing I would like to say is it really is a blessing to be here with you. Okay? You're all blessed people because the same God created all of us. All right? And there aren't a lot of them. There's one. There may be a lot of variations on the theme, but it all essentially distills down to one thing. Each of you are God's creation, and you're on an eternal journey. And that's what this presentation is really about. Okay? I'm a child of the 60s. And there's a song that says there's something happening here, and it's not exactly clear. So if anyone in here has special clarity, is still on a journey. Okay? So each of you are in your own place, moving at your own speed. There's no destination that anyone has to hit at a particular time, so just take it as you can take it. Okay? I had a most amazing experience yesterday. It took me all day to get here. And I've already learned a few things about this group just through what I experienced yesterday. I read a book that my son gave me by a guy named Captain Black called The Journey to Heaven. If you haven't read it, it's an amazing story about a man who survives an airplane crash, the only one. And it's this whole journey of spiritual growth, both as a Christian and in a ministry. Okay? He actually went to heaven, and that tells about it. Well, anyway, I saw this veteran walking through the airport. I love veterans, and when we get started with the presentation here, we're actually going to start it in the way I do every one. And I saw him, and I said, I have to go talk to him, but I have no idea who he was. And I was sitting eating lunch, and I just saw this man walk by in a veteran's jacket with an Air Force hat on. You know, a pleasant-looking man. I just felt compelled that I needed to talk to him. Well, lo and behold, we were sitting in the airport for 4 hours, delayed here. And I finished reading the book I started, which was the book by Captain Black, which was great, because I don't often get a chance to just sit and think and read all day. And lo and behold, I get on the plane, and who's sitting next to me? Yikes. Okay? That's the appropriate word. The action verb, yikes. Well, it's like we knew each other forever. His name is Jack Lee Reno. I know something about his wife, I know about his whole family. And lo and behold, he said, what are you doing? So I'm going to Chicago to speak to a group of people. And what are you going to speak about? My book. Before that was over, he's going to buy my book and go get it and everything else. But I said I'm speaking to a group about near-death experiences, which I don't know that much about, but profoundly impacted by it. And he said, well, let me tell you about mine. So I'm dialing in here, and I just finished reading this book by Captain Black, and at the very end of it, there's a whole thing about a prayer that he told and helped a friend who adopted Jesus as a Savior, or accepted Jesus as a Savior. And so I'm going to say that prayer. And I said it, and lo and behold, it was seeking answers. And he sits on this plane next to me, but this man relates his experiences to me, and it's like we've known each other forever. So you're not here by accident, and I'm not here by accident, and I'm actually going to learn more about the world that I'm in now through this experience than you're going to learn from me. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me here. Before I get started, or part of the presentation, is I travel with what I call my Navy of Angels. And my second book, I briefly described what the book will be about when it comes out. This book is This book here is dedicated to the 21 men that were killed serving aboard USS Natoma Bay in World War II. And so before I start, I want to let you know that you have 20 angels with you in this room, because they travel around with me. And I talk to them, and they talk back. I don't know, Diane, I don't know whether they're my guides or not. But I want to dedicate this presentation to these men because I don't want the world to forget them. So here we go. Reuben Ivan Gorison, killed February 7, 1944, as a TBM pilot, ensign DC-63. DC is a squadron that flew off Natoma Bay. With him that was killed the same day were Eldon R. Bailey, his aviation ordnance man, machine gunner, and Edward Barron, and he was the radio man. Edmund Randolph Lang, killed April 14, 1944, as an FM2 pilot, DC-63. Adrian Chabannes Hunter, killed October 19, 1944, an FM2 pilot, DC-81. Leon Stevens Connor, killed October 25, 1944, TBM pilot, DC-81. Along with him, his crewmates Donald E. Bullis and Lewis King Hill, aviation radio man and ordnance man. Edward J. Schrambeck from Chicago, killed October 26, 1944. He was an aviation radio man on an aircraft that landed, engine failed, and the aircraft went over and they couldn't get him out of the aircraft before it sank. Walter John Devlin, killed October 26, 1944, FM2 pilot, ensign DC-81. You'll hear a little bit more about John Devlin in a little while, or Walter Devlin. Billy Rufus Peeler, killed November 17, 1944, FM2 pilot, ensign DC-81. Lloyd Sumner Holton, November 17, 1944, same day. They were two friends and went out joyriding, and their airplane engine failed and they crashed and they weren't recovered. He was the engineering officer for DC-81. George Hunter Neese, January 6, 1945, TBM pilot, aviation machinist mate on TBM DC-81. John Francis Sargent Jr., January 6, 1945, is an FM2 pilot, again with DC-81. James McCready Houston Jr., killed March 3, 1945, is a junior grade DC-81. You're going to hear a lot more about Jim here in a little bit. Peter Hamilton Hazard, March 27, 1945, TBM pilot, lieutenant junior grade, DC-9. William Patrick Byrd and Clarence Edward Davis, both on his crew as aviation ordnance man and aviation radio man. And Richard Emery Quack, April 9, 1945, a pilot and DC-9. And then Robert William Washburn, April 9, 1945, FM2 pilot, DC-9. And then Lorraine Alexander Sandberg, June 7, 1945, the only member of the ship's company killed when the ship was hit by a kamikaze plane. And he was the only man killed. He was also the last aircraft carrier hit by a kamikaze plane in World War II. So these are the Navy of Angels that are with you today. Okay. All right, now we're going to get into this thing. I hope I'm not too confusing. It's an amazing story. It's changed my life. It's changed our lives. And in a most blessed way, it's helped change other people's lives. As a Christian, I've watched this thing from the very beginning to see what fruit the tree bears. And I can tell you with unwavering 100% certainty it has helped move people in the direction of the spiritual journey that each of us are on, and in the positive direction. I've received messages on our blog and calls and letters from atheists saying you ruined my theory. If I help one of those people come closer to the God that created all of us, then that's enough. Okay. So that's how I feel about this. So it's very humbling and quite a privilege to be on God's team doing God's work. That's how I feel. Okay. Our book is in 5 languages right now. We're also waiting for an Italian edition to come out. Interesting side note is we're in discussion, serious discussion with a movie producer. So that may happen. But regardless of what happens, we're just going to keep doing what we need to do to help anyone in this room or anyone else who wants to go on their journey, because you're on it whether you like it or not. This is a little strange to think that out of the mouths of babes, James was this big when he started telling us these things. So I want to put this in a context. Most of you know the story, but it's a startling thing to see a 2-year-old face that's so cute, so lovable, so full of 2-year-old life, and it was so full of terror. He was indeed brave to come back. This is when it started. I took him to this little museum in Addison, Texas, and what you can't capture here is he didn't just stand there and point at it and walk away. He stood and pointed at those aircraft for 20 or 30 minutes. I couldn't take him out of this room. I'd take him to another section of the museum, and he'd come back, and he wanted to be here. So I took him again 3 months later, and that was when I took this picture, and he was doing the same thing. So we think that this was like a major triggering event, because the nightmares started not long after this started. One of the little things he did, and it's kind of hard to see this, but this is our distressed furniture. He had little toys, and he'd run around the table, airplane crash on fire, airplane, and he'd dive them into the table. And he did it for months and months and months. Okay. He also started to have frequent, violent nightmares. And I'm not kidding you, the first time I saw him thrashing around in bed, I saw the movie The Exorcist when it came out. And that's what I thought. Holy cow, let's go get somebody. Okay. Well, over time, he started to articulate. You got to remember, he's a 2-year-old. So he's learning how to talk and do this and that, and every week new words and stuff like this. And it was finally Andrea caught it one night. The airplane crashed on fire, little man can't get out. And Andrew says, that's what it's about. Holy, what's going on? Now I have 5 children. I have 4 children that are out of college. One is married, the other one's getting married. I got one engaged, and the other one's going to be getting engaged. So I put them all through college, and then I go and get a second marriage, and I have a 13-year-old. Where's my therapist? No. All right? But we're pals, and right from the very beginning, I've loved this boy to death. We're like Forrest Gump said, like peas and carrots. We go everywhere together, we do everything together, and I just love the bits. Okay? But over time, he gave us some startling details. Well, what kind of airplane were you in? Corsair. Okay. What happened to your plane? It got shot in the engine. Well, who shot your plane? And the night I asked him that question, he looked at me like I was a village idiot. The Japanese. Don't you know, idiot? I mean, that was the tone he had. He kind of tilted his head sideways and said, what'd you fall off of? Then we went on a little bit further. I said, well, Japanese, Corsair. I knew enough about World War II to say, well, where'd your airplane come from? He said it came from a boat. The boat have a name? He said, yes, Natoma. I responded to him and said, that sounds Japanese to me. And he goes, no, it's an American. And again, he rolled his eyes at me and, you just don't get it, Dad. That was August 27th in 2000. And the reason I have that is because when I went and Googled it and found the history of Natoma Bay, that's how I know what the date is.
How old is he?
13. He's now 13.
No, when he said this.
2 years and 4 months. He was born April 10th, Good Friday, 1998. We then said, well, is anyone else in your dreams? Because when we'd ask him who was in his dreams, he'd say, James, me, James. Well, he's 2, you know. We didn't have any inkling of what was happening at that point other than we were concerned about these nightmares. So was anyone else in your dream? He said, yes, a guy named Jack. I said, did Jack have a second name? He said, yeah, Jack Larson. Well, that threw me into a whole world of hurt. There's actually 179 men killed in World War II who are missing with the last name Larson. Because I have the list. So, not long after that, he then mentioned something about being at Iwo Jima, and that was when his plane was shot down. Well, this is Natoma Bay, USS Natoma Bay, CVE 62, served in the Pacific in World War II. This is Jack Larson, right around the time that my son would have met him when he was Jim Houston. And that's my son with Jack Larson at a reunion in San Antonio in 2004. Okay. This is a picture of Jack Larson and Jim Houston together, taken on February 7th, 1945, shortly before Jim Houston was killed. So they were together. This is the book that I purchased from my father. My father was a veteran of World War II right at the end in the Marine Corps. And once a Marine, always a Marine. Very proud group of men and women, very brave. But I bought this book, I was going to give it to him, and I'm looking at it a day after Thanksgiving, waiting for some cartoons to come on, and James hops in my lap. I said, well, let's look at this, the cartoons aren't on. I get to this page, and without hesitation, he goes, Daddy, that's when my plane got shot down. So I went trotting back to my little history and found out that the ship was supported the Battle of Iwo Jima. So I had 3 things. I had a ship, I had a location, I had the name of a man. Drove me crazy. Because right around that time, my wife and what is affectionately in the book called the panel, which is my wife, my mother-in-law, my 2 sister-in-laws, that I battled with. Now, you got to figure out what kind of stupid am I, right? I'm going to argue with 4 women and win. I mean, come on, guys, right? Have some pity. Because I fought with them. I didn't believe that this could happen, but the theory came up that this could be reincarnation. And if you read the first word of chapter 10 in my book, I know this is being taped, so I'm not going to say the word, but you'll find it on the first page of chapter 10. Well, this lit a fuse. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know what I'm going to do. And over a period of time, what I did is I found this guy, Leo Pyatt. He's a dear friend. He lives in Columbus, Ohio, and he's one of the sweetest human beings on the face of the earth. He's one of my heroes. I got a hold of him, and there's a thing called a long, thin thread you hear about in a few minutes. And I started to talk to him. I gave him a BS story about why I was calling him, because I couldn't call him up and say, hey, Leo, my 2-year-old was on board Natoma Bay with you in World War II. You know what a dial tone sounds like, right? Okay. So So I asked him some questions. I said, did a Corsair ever fly up in the Toma Bay? He said, no. What kind of airplanes? And he gave me these FM2 and TBM-1C. So what is that? Well, it was a Wildcat and an Avenger. I said, no Corsairs, no. Well, that was my ace in the hole. Well, how could he tell me about a Corsair if there wasn't one? And I kind of clung to that for quite a long time. So I asked him a couple other questions. Well, tell me, can you tell me anything about Iwo Jima? He said, well, sort of. I said, what do you mean, sort of? He said, well, I flew 36 missions there. And my heart started to beat like a rabbit's. Okay? Because here I am, I'm talking to a guy that was in the squadron at that time, and it's like I hit the lottery. And I really got nervous, and I mustered up the courage to ask him this question. Leo, can you tell me about Jack Larson? And he goes, oh, I remember Jack. He flew off one day and we never saw him again. And right after I scooped up the brains that slid out of my ears and put them back in my head, I was finally able to come back and talk to him. Because that wasn't supposed to happen. How in the world could a child give me the name of a man that was at a certain place at a certain time with him 55, 60 years ago? But a switch went on at that moment, and it scared the daylights out of me. Because I didn't know what I was going to find. I didn't know how I was going to find it, and I didn't know what the consequences of it would be. But I said, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know where it's going to come from, but that's what I'm going to do. Now, for people that know me, I'm noted for, if that's what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do. Okay? And if I got to pull the wagon myself, I'll pull the wagon myself. That's the one thing I'm proud of. I'm pig-headed. I'm a determined person. And determination will overcome a lot of shortcomings. Okay? And I have a long list of those, but we're not going to talk about those today. So anyway, this is James with Leo at the 2004 reunion. Then James started to do some things that were really confusing because we didn't have answers at this point other than, well, something's going on. And he started to do these drawings, and the originals of these drawings are out front. And I screwed up the courage one day to ask him why he was signing some of them James 3. And he said, I'm the third James. Are you speaking in code? What does that mean? I don't know what it meant. Well, lo and behold, after a long journey, because I'm going to kind of start chasing through this thing because we have a lot to do, it eventually came out that the person that he spoke about was this man, James McCready Houston Jr., who I'm going to refer to from now on as Jimmy. We're going to talk about James, my son, and Jimmy, which is where all of these memories came from. He was killed on March 3rd, 1945. Now, it took about 3 years to find that out. So this is, the book is nice and linear, but that's not the way it was, not the way we experienced it. Because there were a lot of things that they dangled out there for a long time. But this is who he remembered. Then there's things that continue to blow my mind. There's things that he said, and you're going to see a letter he wrote for a school assignment just last fall. And you're going to say, a 12-year-old wrote that. We're going to see that later. Okay. But he would do things that blew my mind. He'd say things that were just so amazing. It was my birthday, and I don't remember what year it was, but he was maybe 4 or 5. And I would get home and we'd go for a walk. And so I'm walking along, and I said, well, Daddy had a good day. Daddy had a hard day. Things didn't go well in terms of the consulting world, and the wheels fell off of a project and all that stuff. He said, well, Dad, he said, don't worry. He said, life is like a carrier landing. If you walk away from it, it's okay. Had a lot of really profound discussions with 3-year-olds, like, where's the toilet? Okay, where's my mac and cheese? Then there was another time he was playing in a little sunroom, and I didn't see this, but my wife related to it. He was in there and he was talking, and he stood up and he was saluting, "Yes, sir." And he's going through this whole ritual, and he said, "Yes, sir, I'll do it. I know it. I know it. This is my neck, but I'll do it." As it turns out, Jim Houston was the first volunteer on the mission in which he was killed. Okay. It can end so quickly. You can actually find this on a link that Diane has on YouTube. It's the Fox television piece that was done in Cleveland, where we were on Skype in my office in my house, and he was talking about how it can end so quickly, that we must enjoy this life because it can end so quickly in the blink of an eye. And he was maybe 8 or 9 when he did that, just at the time our book came out. You know, there's a lot of 7 or 8-year-olds that just run around talking like that. Okay? One of the most comical things he did was this thing about "we won the war." Now, this is one of the mysteries of this phenomenon, because how do you remember what, when, and what don't you remember? Well, we were at my sister-in-law's house, and he and his cousin Hunter and cousin KK, they were playing in the pool, and there's a little fountain in the pool, had kind of a round turret on it, and they were up there, and they're shooting around, and excuse me for being politically incorrect, but they're going, "Shoot the Jap, shoot the Jap." They were little kids, you know. So my wife calls James over and says, "Listen," I said, "just, you know, don't say that. They're Japanese." And she says, "You don't need to worry about it." This is because we won the war. Well, you'd have thought BJ Day broke out right there. He was hopping around. "We won the war? We won," and he was jumping up and down like it had just happened. Now, how can he identify with that? You know, I can understand Corsairs and I can understand this and that, but how are some of the things that he was coming up with landing in this little head? And then the other thing, and a little bit of this is in the book, and there's a spot, we received some things from Ann Barron, who is Jimmy Houston's sister. And we opened it up and we gave them to him, and one was a little Bakelite plastic model of a Corsair. And he's kind of looking at it, you see him processing it, puts it up to his nose. What's he doing? And he goes, "Daddy, this smells like an aircraft carrier." I said, "What?" He goes, he just looks at me. "It smells like an aircraft carrier. Come on, don't you know what an aircraft carrier smells like?" You know? Where does that come from? You know? One of the most amazing things about this story is there's sounds. There's things he saw, olfactory sense. It's things that he tasted that reminded him of serving aboard the Potomac Bay. We were having meatloaf once. My wife has made meatloaf 3 times in my 19-year marriage. First time we had it, when he had it, he was about 3. And he ate about a pound of meatloaf. I said, "James, what are you doing?" He said, "This is great. We used to eat this on the Potomac Bay all the time." And so these olfactory senses, the hearing senses, okay, I'll give you a hearing thing later. Another mind-blowing moment. We were picking up after Hurricane Lily. The only thing I don't like about living in Louisiana, you're the target of Mother Nature's hostility every once in a while. Otherwise, it's the most beautiful place to live. Beautiful people. Well, anyway, we're cleaning up after it, and he's jumping in the leaves and spreading them around faster than I can pick them up. I said, "James, come on over here and let me love on you. You're such a good little boy." And I sat on a little step going up into a building in our backyard. And he hops on my lap, and he goes, "Well, I knew you'd be a good daddy when I picked you." Here comes another melted brain moment. Okay? And he still does that to me. It still gives me goosebumps. I said, "What do you mean when I found you?" He said, "Well, when I knew you and Mommy would be good parents when I found you." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And really, if you felt my skin right now, so I'm just full of goosebumps. Okay? He said, well, when I found you. I said, well, where did you find us? He said, I found you in Hawaii. I said, I didn't. I said, we just went to Hawaii a few months ago. We had sold the company I'd worked for, and I took my golden parachute. We went to Hawaii for 3 weeks and had a great time. Took my mother-in-law, James, and Andrea, and we had a ball. I said, we were there at Grammy. He said, no, it was before. It was just you and Mommy. And I was going to have aha moment. I said, well, where were we? He said, you were at a big pink hotel. Well, what were you doing? That feeling is coming, right? He said, you and Mommy were out on the beach at night having dinner. My wife, I was living in the West Coast, and Andrea and I went to Hawaii for our 5th anniversary in the early summer of 1997. And we stayed at the Big Pink Hotel. And we celebrated our anniversary in a little tent on the beach where we had a nice private dinner to celebrate our 5th anniversary. He was conceived 5 weeks later. So he said he found us there. I believe him, because he didn't know any of this. This is not the kind of thing, right? You sit down and say, well, here's what we did to celebrate our anniversary. You know, you tell your kids that all the time, right? Especially when you're 3. Some of the other things, they're guardian angels. He has guardian angels. The native angels is with us. I know they're with us. I feel them all the time. Okay. We have lights go on and off in our house. Bells go on and off in our house. We hear footprints in the house. Okay. My son loves sushi. I like it too, and so does my wife. So every once in a while we go to a Japanese restaurant and have some sushi. Well, the first time we were there, James is sitting there. He's kind of giggling, and we look, what are you giggling about? He says, oh, Billy's mad. He says, what do you mean Billy's mad? He says, well, he's here with us. So what's he mad about? He said, we're eating Jap food. Amazing. Scared babysitters. We've had babysitters, and every once in a while you would see something go past the window and come back. Well, we've had babysitters there with their parents when we get home because they're afraid somebody's outside. So we're not the only ones seeing it. You know, it's not a self-induced, self-hypnosis thing where we have the only hallucination. Okay? People that don't know anything about it are scared out of their wits. That's a zero. Or it's not a zero, it's a Tony, and this is referred to in the book. We were watching a special on Corsairs, and they were fighting Japanese zeros and so on and so forth. Well, his little foot comes on, and without saying a thing, he says, that's not a zero, that's a Tony. Anybody in here know what a Tony aircraft is? Anybody in here claim to know anything about World War II? Well, I called Jack Larson up to ask him. I figured he would know. And then I started to think, and I went and looked. And I asked him, I said, well, what was a Tony? He said, well, it was smaller and faster than the zero. He was 5 or 6. So I went and looked at some of the research materials that I'd started to gather by that point, and I found out that the Tony was an airplane called the Swallow by the Kawasaki company that made it. And it was a knockoff of an ME-109 that had been dismantled and sent by sub to Japan. And it was smaller and faster than the Zero, and there weren't very many of them that were ever built. Now, lo and behold, Squadron VC-81 shot down 21 aircraft in its time on Natoma Bay. And on October 27th, 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, Jim Houston shot down the only Tony that squadron shot down. So that's kind of scary. And he wasn't the only one that shot it, but he was the first one that saw it and attacked it. It's missing an antenna. There were times where we tried to prompt memories, and it wasn't that kind of thing. You know, you could be going down the road, right, for rain, right? Going down the road, and all of a sudden you smell something that makes you think of when you were in 8th grade. You have this spontaneous memory. That's the way his memories worked. Okay? It was not something you could interview him to do. And but what I did is we built all kinds of little airplanes and had them hanging from the ceiling in his room. And it's like just a collection of World War II aircraft, except for one F-18, which is what he wants to fly when he gets bigger. And so I built a model of an FM2, and the reason I built it was I had noticed that on the anniversary date of Jim Houston's death, James had a nightmare for a couple of years. And I extrapolated it out, and it kind of was roughly the time when Houston would have been killed. I figured, well, I'll build this little model, and it'll prompt a memory, and I'll be able to catch it on tape. Well, that didn't work. But what did happen is I would let him play with these things before we'd hang them up. They're made out of plastic, so if he drops it or smashes it, I can glue it back together and we'll hang it back up. So we're going to hang it up, and I said, oh, it's time to hang it up, and he goes, no, it's missing a part. So what do you mean? It's missing an antenna. I said, no, there's an antenna right behind the cockpit on the dorsal part of the aircraft, and then there's one up on the stabilizer. He goes, no, there was a third one. I said, well, it wasn't in the parts putting the model together. He said, there was a third one. And again, he's looking at me like, you don't need to discuss this with me. Just chill, I'm right. So I went and started to look through some of the research materials I had. Now you got to understand that the materials I collected were kept away from him. I didn't have them out laying around on the coffee table. Because first of all, most of it's just boring page after page after page stuff. Okay. This is a photo taken from Walk Around. There's a series of these little books that come out about aircraft, and they're very informative, very interesting, and mostly pictures, which means I like reading. And this is a guy in a period uniform showing what it looked like to fly an FM2. Well, if you look back at the star on the side of the aircraft, see a little white dot there in that black field. Said, James, well, how do you know there was an antenna on there? He said, well, sometimes you'd bump into it when you got on the aircraft. So, if you look there, that's an antenna. And it's a little bakelite thing, a ceramic thing, sticks out about that far. And if you look down here at this little round thing, that's a little kick plate where you climb up onto the aircraft to get onto the wing to get into the cockpit. And it's right next to that antenna. So in all likelihood, he was telling me the truth. I don't know how he invented it. Somebody said, well, he's on ABC Primetime. Well, Stephen Kurtz, who I've met, he's a very interesting man. It's in a world of delusion. So, well, he's talking to his little friends, yeah. Little cookie club getting together. Oh, let's talk about parts and aircraft today. What's the next syllabus item? We're going to translate Lithuanian into Russian. Another item is artwork exposed. This is a little picture, and what you can't really tell is on this screen it's so big, but if you look at over here, it's about the actual size. It was about 3 inches by 5 inches, and it was a picture that we got from Jim Houston's sister when we first learned about Jim Houston. And it's a picture of Jim Houston painted by his mother when he was 2. Well, she was a very accomplished artist. And one day I come home from work and there's a FedEx little package sitting out on the thing, and I open it up and I pull it open, and lo and behold, it's a picture of a little girl. is Ann Barron when she was 2. Annie is Jimmy's sister. Well, James specifically asked about this drawing. And if you go out front in the book, there's a little picture of this thing with a copy of the original note. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get this to you, but this must be the one that you're asking me about. It's the only one my mother ever did of me. That was in an attic in Los Gatos, California. And James called and asked about it from Lafayette, Louisiana. There's only a couple people in the world that even knew about this painting. Other item, the men who met him in heaven. Part of my Navy of Angels, or our Navy of Angels, because I'll share them with you. Okay? James and Billy, because of his interest in aircraft, he started to receive all kinds of military-based airplanes, toys. He started to get some G.I. Joe dolls. And this is Billy. And you can see he's sleeping with Billy. And this picture was taken on March 30th, 2003. So he might have got this for his birthday, because his birthday is April 10th. And he's palling around with Billy. Well, we didn't think anything of it when he named the little doll Billy. Other than that's, I guess, an interesting name. Where did it come from? Well, lo and behold, he then went, well, I'm going to go back. I don't want to ruin this. He then received 2 additional dolls, and he only ever received 3, which is kind of kooky in and of itself. The second one he got had blonde hair, and he named it Leon. A real common name. The only person that I know is the name Leon is a guy that was a professional boxer named Leon Spinks. I don't know anyone else named Leon. Certainly never met anyone, I don't even think I've met anyone personally that's named Leon. Okay? The third doll he got, it was a Navy SEAL doll, but it had, it was a G.I. Joe Navy SEAL thing, came with all kinds of gear and stuff like that. And it had red hair, and they called it Walter. Walter, okay? I don't know anybody named Walter. The only thing that came to my mind is that my ex-brother-in-law's named Walter. You didn't know him, and he didn't have red hair. I said, what the heck is going on? And by this time, I had developed a list of the men that had been killed serving aboard the Tumble Bay doing my research, and it registered with me. Now in the book, it's kind of told a little differently than how it really happened. I said, man, these names mean something to me now. Why is he calling them by these names? And he got that one at Christmas. So he was in his room, and we went in, and I looked at him, and I said, James, why did you name your dolls Billy, Walter, and Leon? He said, because they greeted me when I went to heaven. This is Billy Rufus Peeler. Billy Rufus Peeler was from Granite Quarry, North Carolina. His brother lives in Alexandria named Wallace. And he was killed on November 17, 1944. He flew the same kind of aircraft that Jim Houston flew off of Natoma Bay. And they flew missions together. This is Leon Stevens Connor from Eufaula, Alabama. He won the Navy Cross during the Battle of off Samar Island, which is during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, October 25th, 1944. And Leon had blonde hair. Walter John Devlin, they called him Big Red. He was, according to Ken Wabel, who recently passed away, he couldn't figure out how he could get into the cockpit of an FM2. Devlin was about 6'4", and getting into the cockpit of an FM2 is like climbing into a matchbox. They're really not very big. He was killed on October 26, 1944, was also an FM2 pilot, same kind of aircraft. James Houston was killed on March 3rd. So all 3 men were killed before him. They flew in the same squadron. They would have been friends. And their who greeted him when he went to heaven. Another item was, and my wife is great. My wife would have found Osama bin Laden years ago. I don't know why they didn't come and get the damn panel. She can ask more questions in 30 seconds. It's like, well, James is in the sunroom and he's playing, and it was right after this thing about the Navy, the angels that met him in heaven, or the gods that met him in heaven. And she was curious. They said, is there really a heaven? And he goes, oh yeah, Mom, there's really a heaven. And then you can come back. He says, what's it like? He says, it's hard to describe, it's just really beautiful. So then it's the Andrea gotcha question. Is God a man or a woman? And she says, I was just curious. James goes, God is not a man or a woman. God is whatever you need at the time.
Can you say that again?
God is not a man or a woman. God is whatever you need God to be at that time. Now listen, I could talk to a really erudite, sophisticated clergyman and tell me I'm going to go to hell. And I'm going to tell him, run your own errands. That's a pretty sophisticated statement, because it's who God is for each of us. Whenever we need to praise God, thank God, seek God's love, seek God's support when we need it. And each of us have been there in various ways. Okay? Finding Ann Barron. Now this is the long, thin thread. This is not by coincidence. My life is actually turning into a sort of ministry for hard-headed people that don't get it. Plenty of them out there, right? For the skeptical people. You know, we grow up in a world where we have to have answers. We watch it, we turn a TV show on at 8 o'clock, and by 8:30, it's done, and we know. So at 8:20, we're going, come on, where's the solution? You know, my wife and I were enjoying watching the show American Idol. Now, don't give me all the rest of that stuff. Who won? Just fast forward TiVo. Who won? Okay? That's the way we live. So we expect answers in a hurry. And when we don't get them, then we're filled with doubt and suspicion. So this story provides answers. It's just a story. It's just telling you what happened. So I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I can just tell you what happened. I can prove it. Okay? Because that's what we need today. We're so filled with technology and putting our fingers on it, you know. We have to put our finger on it. So many of us will be reinforced by that and feel more comfortable, because this is scary territory. Because it has to do with our spirits. It has to do with getting right in deep, which is where this thing got to, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Okay? It's the most profound experience I've ever been through. But for James to get with Annie, and that's what he calls it. They talk to each other on a regular basis. They call each other on their birthdays and stuff like that. But they're friends. And it gave her healing, because she never really knew what happened to her brother. Her father died before records were released that could have told him what happened. So he went to his grave not knowing what happened to his son. And he actually went to some reunions of Natoma Bay asking questions. Gee, did you know anything about my son? And he never got any answers. So he died not knowing. A lot of people that we shared information with out of these other 20 men, it was the same way. They didn't know what happened to their loved ones. The coldest thing in the earth that I've ever seen as a document of such important emotional experience is the telegram you get saying your husband is missing in action, remains unknown, or we can't divulge what happened because there's a war on. And that's what you get. A little orange telegram. I have 5 of them in my house that I've gotten from families of the men lost. So the one healing thing, and this is the fruit on the tree for those of you that need fruit. You need proof. the spiritual healing that took place for those people when they found out what happened to their loved one. Just the peace it gave them, the closure it gave them. Okay? So with Annie, that's part of it. I had a theory that I held on to that, well, it wasn't a Corsair. There were no Corsairs on the Natoma Bay. And in the package of information that Annie sent to me when we found her was this picture of Jim Houston flying, standing in front of a damn Corsair. It ruined my theory. You're wrecking my deal over here. What the heck is that all about? Well, what it's all about was before Jim Houston came to Natoma Bay, he was assigned to an experimental squadron called BF 301, and they test flew the re-engineered Corsair off of the USS Gambier Bay in April 1944, and that's when the Navy started using it. Up until then, because of problems they had with the aircraft, the Marines used it. They re-engineered it, and he was part of the group that test flew them on and off of the USS Gambier Bay, which was also an aircraft carrier the same class as Natoma Bay, and it was sunk during the battle off Samar Island. It was the only ship, only aircraft carrier sank by surface gunfire in World War II. I came back from the Natoma Bay reunion, and at 20 minutes after midnight on September 14th, 2002, I wrote this email to a website just saying, I'm doing this research. If anybody can tell me anything about this event, please call me or get a hold of me. I threw a bottle into the ocean with a note in it. Okay. This is a really obscure website. Maybe 150 people have left postings on it, and it's been up for years. Lo and behold, I got an email from a guy named Jack Durham in May of 2003 saying, I think I flew on that mission that day, and I think we saw a guy get shot down. Well, I went racing to my records, and I said, well, what squadron were you in? What aircraft carrier did you fly from? This is DC-83 USS Sergeant Bay, another escort carrier. I went rustling to my records, and lo and behold, there were 8 aircraft from Sergeant Bay flew on the same mission, and the guys from Natoma Bay were the escort. And he said, well, I saw what happened. This plane got hit in the engine and crashed into water, which is what James said. If you look at the ABC primetime piece, a guy named Ralph Clavor. Ralph lived here in Chicago. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was the president of the American Institute of Steel Erection Contractors. And if you look at that video, and he's the guy in it pointing directly to the engine. Okay. He responded to my note on that website. So let's talk about the long, thin thread. First thing was, the 4 guys I tried to call, and I got Leo Pyatt. Leo was the only one from the squadron. The other 3 wouldn't have known anything about who Jack Larson was, because ship's company and air crews don't mix on aircraft carriers. Okay? Why did I get Leo? Because if I'd have got John DeWitt would have said, I don't know who he is. Because he wouldn't have. The other 2 guys were dead. So my probability, 1 in 4, so we're already starting to play some odds, if you play odds. This note in a bottle. Who the heck would have thought that I'd have got that? So specific, and not just that, but eyewitnesses. Okay. Now, I interviewed all of those men. I went to that reunion. I took that picture. There's a 4th man named John Richardson. We're going to go away from this for a second because I want to tell you some of the true meaning of this story. This whole thing is about healing. This whole thing is about spiritual growth. It's an exciting, compelling story, but it's about each of you. I'm going to read you a little passage because I went to interview John, and if there's a movie, I'm playing John because I can do it in my head. Okay, so we're going to read a little bit from the book here for a second. Bear with me. Now I'm going to preface this by kind of cutting to the chase. I found Jack Durham. Jack Durham has told me there's other guys. Okay. I'm going to preface this a little bit. I found Jack Durham. I'm talking to Jack Durham. He said there's other guys. He gave me the names. They were also on the mission, and they saw Houston's plane get hit. So over the next week or a few, I had to go talk to these people. I had to go touch them, put my hands on them. Is he real? You know, for instance, you read a book by this guy named Bruce. Is he real? Yeah, I'm kind of real. Here I am. Okay. So as was his habit, Bruce wanted to visit the veterans, speak to them face to face, prove to himself he was getting the real thing from reliable sources. John Richardson lived in Nacogdoches, Texas. He was suffering from Parkinson's disease, but he was eager to see Bruce. He asked Bruce to bring a photograph of the dead pilot with him. I drove 300 miles to see him. John was really not in very good shape, but he said he had some things to get off his chest. So he was kind of struggling with his emotions, and he started by this, because I have taped this. This mission turned out to be a real hairy one. We had gotten a word about Chichijima and just how dangerous a place it was. But we were full of piss and vinegar in those days. When you're 19 years old, nothing scares you. I felt different after that day. As we started to form up for our bombing mission, we saw the fighters going in ahead of us. Being a gunner on a TBM is a great spot, a real box seat. All hell was breaking loose. We could see the shells falling in the water beneath us. It looked like rain. The Japs began firing at us when we were well out of range. We formed up for the attack, and of course I could not really see where I was going because it was my job to cover our rear in case of attack. But very quickly, I began to see hundreds of puffs of ugly black smoke all around me as my plane and another plane in my section to the left and behind us were smothered in flak. A fourth plane startled me. It was a fighter. He was just off our left wing. He was firing his machine guns, scraping what was below us. We were no more than 30 yards apart when the pilot deliberately turned his head to me and looked at me. I caught his eyes and we connected with each other. No sooner had we connected than his plane was hit in the engine by what seemed to be a very large shell. There was an instantaneous flash of flames that engulfed the plane. It did not disintegrate, but it almost immediately disappeared below me. At this point, John began to sob. Slowly, he regained his composure. Mr. Leininger, I've lived with that pilot's face as his eyes fixed on me every day since that happened. I never knew who he was. I was the last guy that saw him alive. He began to stammer. Then finished, his voice drenched in emotion. I was the last person he saw before he was killed. His face has haunted me my whole life. I gave him the photo because I recognized his face. I could never forget it. Again, he spoke softly as we retired from the harbor. I could see where Houston went in. The splash from the impact was rippling across the harbor. He hit near a large rock right near the opening. I showed him a diagram. He later spoke to Annie. Annie was very happy that her son didn't, or her brother didn't suffer. Richardson died about 6 months later. So at least he had that 6 months of peace of knowing who this stranger was that was killed in front of him. That section of the book, in my opinion, encapsulates the wondrous joy of this story. It's a story about this life snuffed out. Welcome Rock is a gateway to heaven. The healing that took place. The timeless quality of healing when it does take place. Because if you've ever been sick and you forget it, you forget what it was like when you were sick. Okay? And so to have that moment, for me, you could take the rest of the book and do whatever you want with it. That section of the book takes the whole thing and puts it right into a little package. Okay? Another item of beyond coincidence. This is my son James with Jack Larson and Bob Greenwalt along with Dorothy at the reunion in San Antonio in 2004. Now what in the hell is a 6-year-old doing running around with the two guys that are 84 years old? He was palling with these guys. He followed around like a little puppy. Okay, you saw the other picture of him and Jack. I mean, he was palling it up. A couple of things happen here. Bob Greenwalt, auditory memory. Our sound is the last thing that goes when we pass to the next round. James was going up the elevator to go do his homework, and Bob was coming down. My wife said Bob was coming out of the elevator. He looks at James. Of course, he knew who James was because he'd seen ABC Primetime a few months before. So Bob looks down at him and goes, "Bet you don't know who I am." James looks up at him and goes, "You're Bob Greenwalt." Right after we retrieve Bob's tongue from his throat. So later I said to James, "James, how'd you know that was Mr. Greenwalt?" I didn't even know what he looked like at that point. He said, "I remembered his voice." The other thing that he did at one point is a little somber looking. I said, "What's the matter, James?" He said, "Well," he said, "I'm having a great time." He said, I'm a little sad." He said, "Well, what are you so sad about?" He said, "All these guys are so old." He remembered them differently. Same thing when he met Ann, he had this quizzical look on his face. It was like, well, you're going to a 50th reunion, you're going to get it. Who is that? And who the hell are you? A place of peace, bridging time. We went to Chichijima. We filmed a Japanese television special there in 2006. It was a grateful thing to be able to do, to get invited to such an amazing place. It is a natural beauty. It is one of the most pristine environments I've ever seen. This is Welcome Rock, and just to the left of Welcome Rock you see kind of a whitish area. It's a little shallower. It's right out in that area where Houston's plane crashed. Okay? Well, we went there, something I always wanted to do, because it was the only place where we were able to locate one of the 21 men. All the rest of them were missing at sea somewhere. We have no idea where they are. This is the only one out of the 21 aircraft where we know where the aircraft is and who's in it. Pretty rare. Anyone in here ever occurs or wants to help look for something, see if you can find another instance of that, of a military, U.S. military aircraft in the Pacific Ocean somewhere, and tell me where the aircraft is, who's in it, and where it came from. Okay. We're talking to National Geographic right now about maybe going back there and diving down on it and putting a plaque on it. Okay. But that's going to get done right after the movie, because we're also working on a movie thing. Okay. I don't know when that's going to happen, but it'll happen. This is a diagram of the harbor. This is the picture of the diagram I showed John Richardson, Jack Durham, Ralph Clarbor, all the guys that said they saw what happened. The little X says a little crash site there, right next to it. to Tommy Harbor. It's just part of the aircraft action report for that day, for that mission. We had a unique opportunity. We had a memorial. This is a little letter from Annie saying, please put some flowers on the island in his memory and love of his family. So we had a memorial service, and we really didn't know what was going to happen at that memorial service. So I'm going to try to get you to a section of a video on Science of the Soul that'll show you a little bit about what happened. This was on in December. I'm going to do my best to cue it up. We may have to watch it for a few minutes. But what we did was we went there to honor her, and then we also had a memorial service for the rest of the men that were lost, just like we just did today. So they're all in one place symbolically. Okay. I love these men, and you're never going to forget Natoma Bay. This is getting ready for it, so I'm going to try to break away from here, and we'll watch this video. And I just hope it comes up and plays well.
I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know what I'm going to find, but I'm not going to stop looking until I get as many answers as I can get.
This was enough to send Bruce on an investigation, doing his own research. Over the next 2 years, he learned about the men from the Natoma Bay, both living and dead. And James kept giving his parents additional, tantalizing, eerie clues.
Well, I kept asking him, do you remember what your name was? Do you remember what your name was? And he always said James. And I thought, well, he's two, he's confused. He thinks I'm asking him what his name is.
Then, James started drawing.
That was one of my mission things.
The mission thing, you remember that?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite ones.
The same thing, over and over. Like a movie, compressed all into one frame. An air battle. Flak. A plane on fire. And his signature, James 3.
So one day I was in the kitchen, I was washing dishes, James had breakfast, and he had an airplane, he was just flying around like this. And he goes, Mama, before I was born, I was a pilot, and my airplane got shot in the engine and crashed in the water, and that's how I died. And I was just froze. It was such a bizarre thing to say, but it was just that matter of fact. There was no drama, there was no emotion to it.
At 3, James started pretending to be a pilot, with an attention to detail that astonished his father.
One day he dragged a car seat into the closet in my office, and he set up a little cockpit in there. He had a little play school console, and like it was going to be a cockpit, you know, and he's going back and forth. All of a sudden the door comes flying open, and he comes rolling out of it. I said, James, what happened to you? He says, I said, did you fall? He says, no. He says, my plane got shot, and I bailed out.
The next breakthrough came when Bruce was invited to the Natoma Bay Veterans Reunion. He asked about the names of men killed in battle. And this led him to finally solving the mystery of James 3.
He called me on the phone and he said, you won't believe this, there's only one guy from Natoma Bay who was killed during the battle for Iwo Jima, and his name was James M. Houston Jr. And I said, wait, that would make our James 3. I was so excited. I'm like, that's it. I'm like, that's him. It's James M. Houston. His name is James. It's James 3.
James Houston Jr., World War II Navy pilot. At age 21, on March 3, 1945, his plane was shot down over Chichijima. Now, the skeptical parents were sitting on compelling proof that their little boy really was reincarnated.
And he's always going to be an important part of who you are, but you have a life to live as James Leininger, and it's time for you to say goodbye to Jim Houston. And he just started bawling. And he cried for about 20 minutes.
And he had everyone.
It was the
on the
saddest
boat.
thing I ever seen.
He had everyone on the boat.
Crying.
It's time for us to say goodbye. James Houston. Goodbye, James and Houston.
Good job.
Good boy. So brave. You're such a brave soul. Such a brave soul and spirit.
It was weird when we got back to shore. It was something had changed.
He left something there.
He really did. It was palpable. You could see that he'd mourned that and everything that had happened and was ready to move on. And he really did at that point. That's kind of when everything really changed.
I'm going to be the same thing that James M. Houston was, a pilot.
The next picture that James Leininger drew was one of peace. The nightmares stopped. The memories started to fade.
I don't want him to remember anything about his past life.
All right, not very many people in the United States have seen that, but he went on for 20 minutes, and the Japanese were not really demonstrative people, and they were hugging him and they were holding him. It was incredible. But healing did take place there, and he moved on. He's in this life now. These were the pictures that he drew. His scores on them out front. That was the last one he drew. Is there a difference? Did something happen? Okay. So healing takes place in all kinds of ways. Healing took place for him, right there. The journey ended suddenly and tragically, and he picked the thread up here. Now, talk about the long, thin thread. How in the hell did we get transported to Chichijima? What a miracle that was. Japanese called us and invited us there. Okay? That trip cost in excess of $60,000. Our plane tickets to Japan were $7,000 apiece. We had a translator for 11 days. We took a boat trip. You can't fly to this island. The reason that the Japanese, or the reason we invaded Iwo Jima, which is about 140 miles away, is because there isn't a flat place on here big enough to put a football field on. Okay. And how did we get there? They just took us. Overnight on a ferry, 620 miles, straight south of Tokyo. Chichijima is actually part of the city of Tokyo. You can make a local call to Tokyo from Chichijima. Crazy. But it's the most beautiful place. If you want to go to an unspoiled wilderness, this is where they've taken a picture of giant squid. You can swim with any kind of fish you want to swim with. Whale, sharks, whales. It's just beautiful. The only thing that has scarred the island in any way is all the tunnels and things like that from World War II. There's stuff just laying in the jungle. The radio tower that George Bush bombed and knocked down is laying in the jungle. Because this is where George Bush was shot down. But it's a place of peace. And Welcome Rock is a gateway to heaven. This is Annie and them together, and just a charming thing to happen in terms of reunion. This is still talking about healing. This is a plaque that we dedicated at the Nimitz Museum. So if you ever go to Fredericksburg, Texas, and go to the Nimitz Museum, it's the War of the Pacific, you'll see this plaque there. We dedicated it there to all 21 men that were killed. These are members of the families of the men lost. They got closure here. They had an opportunity to come and honor their brother or their widow or their cousin or their uncle. The guy on the left, that's Wallace Peeler, the younger brother of Billy Peeler. The guy in the middle, the second from the left, that's Roger Goranson. Roger's an attorney, lives in Columbus, Ohio. And he wasn't even born when his uncle, Reuben Goranson, was killed. But he cried on the phone when he called me and said, I got this package. I never knew who my uncle was. And he just broke down, grown man. It was healing. Martha Glesser, Second from the right, Martha, her brother Lloyd Holton was with Billy Peeler when their airplane crashed. And again, able to come and provide healing. The person on the right, that's Annie, that's Ann Barron, that's Jimmy's sister. We had several other families there. We had 9 families of the 21 men at the reunion. First and only time they've ever been to a reunion, and it was an opportunity for healing. This is the fruit. This is what I watch all the time. What kind of fruit does this tree bear? This is Bob Greenwald and Annie. Bob Greenwald packed up Jim Houston's Final Effects and sent him home. They were good friends. That's a picture of Dean Tate, Bob Greenwald, and Jack Larson together for the first time since March 12th, 1945. This was September 14th, 2004. It was an opportunity for these 3 guys to get together with each other and just renew friendship that they've had for a long time. And it's one of my favorite pictures. Okay? The 3 genuine American heroes. And they're my friends. This is a picture of Bob Skelton and John Richardson. John Richardson's the guy in the back on that picture on the right. That's John Richardson. That's the guy that had Parkinson's disease. This picture is about 10 years old when I met John. The spiritual journey. This is section 4 now. We're going to spend a little bit of time on your spirit. W-I-I-F-Y. What's in it for you? From me. Okay, that's the radio station we're all dialed into here. Okay? All right? All of us, and your friends, and your relatives, and generations of people in the past, we tend to dismiss or fear what we don't understand. So part of your journey is you're afraid because you don't understand it. I don't understand a darn thing about this. I can't explain exactly what happens. I can tell you what happened. I can tell you how it happened. I can tell you when it happened, but don't ask for the editorial. Why? Now I have some theories about why. This was a battle with my faith. Again, the first word in chapter 10 of the book is BS. I don't believe this stuff. This doesn't happen. Not in my house. Well, that's a pretty pig-headed, ignorant, stupid thing to say. I'm not stupid. You can cure ignorance, right? There's hope for ignorance. You can get over it. I battled with this. I looked at this from every angle. Okay? What faith is faith is on the opposite side of what we fear. Okay? It's the reward. It's waiting there. Okay? Let me tell you, I felt spiritually and physically naked doing this. I was vulnerable because it was my belief system. It was my heart, it was my soul. And what am I doing dabbling in the occult? Dumbass. That's where I was. That was my place. But I've never ruled out the impossible. You know, the world was flat until it wasn't. Right? And that was the official line of the church. You know, people got hung and burned and dissected because the earth wasn't flat. Okay? There's nothing wrong with faith, and there's nothing wrong with religion. Please don't take it that way. But the reason why this is a church is because wherever 2 are joined together and contemplating the wondrous joy that God provides us, that's a church. The thing down the street is a building. The church is here. The church is the spirit in you and how you meet up with everyone else and what your journey is. Okay? But faith is the confidence that we have in the realization of God's gift to each of us, because it's a gift. And there's a cute little saying that says we call gifts presents because we should live in the present. Don't be worried about what you're going to learn 6 weeks from now. Just take the next step. Just take the next step in your healing. Take the next step in the adventure you have where you are. Yeah. And last of all, you don't judge a book by its cover. Okay? This is not a book about reincarnation. This is a book about your journey. This is a book about the fact that you're on a journey. And for those of you that have picked up my book today and I signed it, I sign everyone the same way. Nurture your soul. You're on an eternal journey. Feed it. That was another one of those things from Feed Your Head from the 60s. We were using the wrong things then. Okay? James is James, and who are you, and why are you here? Not being confused. Nurture your soul, for you're on an eternal journey. The next time you think that God is not there, and this is my son writing, and I'll open up that letter if you want and let everyone read it. But this is a portion. The next time you think that God is not there, just think of this. God had planned for your soul to be put in your body, for your life to be lived, and will always be there for you, regardless of what happens. You're always in God's arms. Even through death, you'll live. That's a 12-year-old. That's my son wrote. Okay? And this is what God's blessing. I'll let you read this, and then we have a little bit of time here. If anyone has any questions or would like to ask anything about anything, just let me know. Okay. James wrote this, and maybe what I'll do is I'll read it because it might get a little difficult to read in the back. I'm going to send a copy of this to Diane, and she can distribute to whoever would like to have a copy of it. James wrote this as part of a journal that he was doing in 7th grade this year. This is nightmares. People think that childhood is a time of happy memories, laughter, running, jumping, and playing. Like childhood memories like Halloween night, running house to house in Batman costume, saying trick or treat to the good folks to give out sweet wonderfulness. Then there's Christmas, seeing the red presents and the tree wrapped in tinsel and tiny ornaments, opening up the red gifts of magical proportions and seeing that you got your wish. Well, my childhood was different. I still had Halloween, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, and birthday memories. But there were also memories that I had that would signify the true meaning of horror. These were called nightmares. My parents would always say, "You're fine, it was just a dream, you're okay." These were different. These are dreams there are dreams which are peaceful and turn out well and waking up refreshed and ready for the next day. Nightmares, they left me tremendously scared and had a horrible turnout. But these weren't nightmares, they were just a simple depiction of pain and suffering, an agonizing thing called death. I stared it in the face every night for 5 years, though never really death. It was like it was simulated. A simulated version that always came back for another round. Every night it was the same. A little man crashed on fire, little man can't get out, the burning torture of fire and smoke hit me every single night for 5 years. Some people have nightmares that are the same for 2 or 3 days, but these lasted for 5 years. The fire, the pain, and torture the same every night. I always died in a flaming cloud and bubbles that covered my face. Every night death had won. Though not nightmares, they were memories from the past, let's say 55 years ago. Dreams are God's way of saying this is what it is like in heaven. But nightmares are the devil's way of laughing at your sheer misery and pain as he watches beyond the darkness. Each night the painful memories came, reminding me of the night before. Every morning the sunrise never gave me no relief from the night before. But death is not a bad thing. You are lifted up from the earth. from life on earth and brought up to heaven is a happy day. The day a person walks through the massive golden gates that are beyond imagination, that the people that died before you greet you, telling you they missed you, but then experiencing the grace of God and Jesus who have watched and waited for you to arrive, and then being blessed by the eternal greatness of God's hands. The nightmares were not dreams, but something that actually happened. The death of James M. Houston Jr., his soul was brought back in human form. He was brought back in my body, and he chose to come back to earth for a reason, to tell people that life is truly everlasting, that God watches you every step of the way. I've heard controversy over whether or not God is a man or a woman. Both answers are wrong. God is not a man or a woman or a child or an animal. God is wherever you need God to be at the time. God is the everlasting life that grants the world to be in God's heavenly kingdom, gives the gift of life through those God has blessed. God is the one who allows all of the creatures created to have life. When we all enter the heavenly gates and are blessed, we will have no more reason to live on earth again. But God chose me to tell the story, change lives, and help those who need it. You can think I'm a fool for knowing this, for doing these things. But when my parents wrote the book about me and my story, people who are deathly ill and have had an incurable disease have sent emails that go like this: your story helped me and made me not afraid to die. Once I leave this earth, I will be in the kingdom of all holiness. Thank you. I get about 2 of these a month, and it helps me think that I've actually helped some people who are dying. The next time you think God is not there, just think of this. God had planned for your soul to be put in your body, for your life to be lived, and will always be there for you, regardless of what happens. You are always in God's arms, even though death will live. Or even through death you will live. Okay, that's a 12-year-old. Yikes. Okay, something going on in that boy's head that I can't get to. I can't put myself in his place as much as I wish I could. But it's a gift that he's sharing with us. So that's really it. It's been a privilege to be here with you. Thank you very much for sitting so nice and still for an hour and a half.
Thank you so much for coming, Bruce, and sharing with us all this information.
It's my privilege.
We hope that you'll bring back our love and care for James as well. So we will be going to Ruby's tonight and Dunn, but he will still be here signing books in the back. And if you have questions, you can ask him at that time.
Anytime you want. Does anyone have any questions right now? I mean, I'd be happy to. Yes. Okay, you were first.
This is very impressive.
Okay.
That this was
Every single person is unique as the fingers prints on their hand, and every person's need is also that unique. And if the person is called to find out about their past lives, there might be a reason for this that's unique to them, that they need to do that. If you're not called to do it, then you certainly don't need to go out and do it. You know, you don't feel like just because it's a thing to do, I gotta go have one of those too. You know, you have to listen to your own heart and your own soul. But if there's a calling there, I think you should respect it. For my own self, I know past life people in this lifetime, and it was pulling me to find out more about this, and I did, and it was very helpful to do that. But somebody else might not have that, and so they wouldn't need it. So each journey is totally unique, and you need to respect yourself as well as everybody else, and that's the bottom foundation for the admonition over and over and over again in all religions, not to judge another person.
Thank you, Diane.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Bruce, in the books I've read, they always say that we tend to travel in soul groups or families. In the book, I was waiting for him to say who you and Andrea were to him in a past life. Did he ever say that?
Yeah, no, he never has. And, I've probably read 30 or 40 books. I had one given to me here. I bought one. I really want to learn about this. My wife and I think somehow or another we were connected. Okay, we don't spend a lot of time talking about it, though, because that's not the mission. If that's true, then it's true. And if it's not true, then it's not true. But that's not dissuading us from why we're here. We're here because we're part of some plan, and I feel so blessed, in spite of the fact that it often scared the daylights out of me, to be, or somewhere, maybe it's just pig-headedness. Maybe certain pig-headedness works. Okay? So from that point of view, we don't focus on it. It'd be cool to know. But that's not, the most important thing is to be touching you. To be helping whoever moves the ball ahead in this room, if it's one person today, that's worth the whole thing. Yes, ma'am?
Are the nightmares important? Meaning to have the experience of the nightmare, is that an important part of the process?
Repeat the question.
He said, is having a nightmare an important part of the process? For him it was. I think for other people, these near-death experiences and memories or different things that manifest themselves are good. I think God gives us what we need and identifies where we need to go. Like, part of the reason why I think I'm here is this is my job. Because maybe I was just pig-headed the last time around. Yes, yes, sir. You were.
Have you had this James horoscope compared to James Houston horoscope?
Yeah, it's on our website. Scary. Lady did one and read it. They're both warriors. They're both mirrors of each other. It's incredible. They're off. I don't understand that stuff. They're off like 1/10 of 1/9 degree or something like that. But they're up. And he was a warrior, and he wants to be a warrior again. Yes, ma'am.
How does this agree with your Christian faith? Or how does it
Repeat the question.
correlate with your Christian faith?
How does it correlate with my Christian faith? This is easy.
Or his?
It is. Okay. When we go to church, when we read the Bible, it's two-dimensional, because the Bible is only two dimensions. Words on a piece of paper. Now, I'm not denigrating it. It's the Word of God. Okay? But it's two-dimensional. I was saying something to someone here. Going through this experience with James has kind of enriched my life, thinking back to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where they wrote these books telling us what God was all about, who Jesus was.
Careful you don't back up.
Okay? Who Jesus was. Okay? All right? And we read what was written 2,000 years ago, and we have faith. We don't have anything else to go on other than some interesting things like this Shroud of Turin or things that, stimulate our brain to think. So, having experienced this, all I do is tell you what happened. It's kind of like whoever wrote the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. Just told you what happened. Okay, and we believe it. So in that case, it has taken my faith from a two-dimensional thing to three-dimensional, as depth. And I continuously watch for the fruit. Now, if this is evil, if this is tinkering with the devil, does anybody here experience any spiritual growth and being closer to God today? Did anybody move further away? Okay, if you move closer, then there you go. Okay, that's the way I do it, and that's how I reconcile myself to it. I haven't seen anything go in any other direction. Yes, sir.
Quick question. I've had a number of experiences that kind of lead me to believe in a lot of this. Mm-hmm. But what I was curious about is how is your son dealing with today, outside of just being himself now, learning how to be who he is in his life? How has it really affected his view of himself and where he's at right now?
Well, I think that the letter that we just read is an indicator. It's something that is on his mind. For instance, some people have suggested he go through regression. Okay? I don't want to make him a test animal. That's the way I felt about it. My job is to protect him. My job is to nurture him. My job is to help him grow his soul. And when he gets old enough and he wants to do something like that, he can. So the whole issue there is we really all on our own journey. For him, he's just really a kind of a normal kid, but he says and does profound things. He has perceptions that blow me away. I mean, I don't know another 12-year-old could write anything like that. Most adults couldn't articulate that. So, but I don't really know, and I spend more time just helping him grow. You know, be responsible. You know, your freedom comes with responsibility, so be responsible along with the freedom you enjoy. Okay. Yes, sir.
Have you had any skeptics counter this? What kind of arguments do they come up with they manufacture?
Well, when someone doesn't believe it, they don't believe it.
No, but
you know.
you get any hard-boiled ones that try to...
Yeah, but their eggs cracked, you know. He said, is there any hard-boiled ones? I'm not going to put anybody down. Why? Because they have a journey. Look, one of the most profoundly important people in my life is C.S. Lewis. Okay? Your Christianity did it for me, man. I was one of those intellectual guys. I'm going to get a PhD from Columbia. I was studying Russian, doing this, working in the State Department, do what? How about people's lives? Well, C.S. Lewis was like that. C.S. Lewis was an agnostic, atheist, and he was going to disprove this whole thing. And along the way, he became one of the greatest voices for Christianity that ever existed in the secular world.
I have a question.
So that's how I deal with it. It's a free country.
What is your profession?
My vocation?
What's your profession? What is your profession?
Oh, I do human resources work. I'm an executive for a helicopter company right now. I've also had a consulting business for it 9 years. I've sat on the Louisiana Workforce Commission. I believe in people's talent and helping them get to their passion and do what they're passionate about. So that's why I like this story.
But before your son was born.
Oh, I was still in human resources. That's my career. I've been doing it since Jesus was a Lance Corporal.
I love it.
So this one probably is that I have a near-death experience, and I know that happened for a reason to me. It was changed my life completely.
Right.
Probably that happens to you that your son has the experience, because probably you were in the path that you have to do it now. That your journey to.
Oh yeah, I'm the one that got hit by the truck. You know, this had a profound impact on me. I was stuck in a different place. But like I said, you can cure ignorance. You know, you get over your fear by doing what you're afraid of. Yes, ma'am.
Did you say your son has psychic abilities other than,
They haven't. There's been no manifestation of that right now, but who knows where it'll go? I mean, it's going to be an interesting thing. I don't want to let him do anything else other than what he wants to focus on, and I want to give him as much of a chance to do it as he can. But he's a profoundly sensitive person. He's chivalrous. He cares deeply about people. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see where he winds up.
Given what you just said about his sensitivities, I'm thinking about being a warrior again.
And I'm not sure he'll get there. I think right now he's 12, you know. But from the point of view of protecting people from evil, from the other side of the equation. You know, one of my hardest things as a Christian, in terms of talking about, you know, evil and stuff like that, is, you know, why does God allow that to happen? Well, God is helping you find your path. I really believe that God doesn't want to be alone. He wants friends.
Wants love.
God wants love around him. And there's an elevation that we have to get to that's pretty profound to get there. So if it takes growth, then it takes growth. And the issue of judgment, you know, is a nebulous one. Or you risk judgment. Does that mean it happens once? I don't know. Doesn't appear to. Or, you know, are we stuck, you know, we have tasks. That's the mystery. But that's why I say just deal with it yourself and find your path. Yes, sir.
I think not to be spoken. He is being a warrior.
Yeah, he wants to be one.
Trying
Yeah.
to actually fill the gaps of our ignorance. That kind of warrior.
It might be a spiritual warrior. Yeah, yeah. Spiritual warfare. There's some good books out on spiritual warfare.
I just, one quick other
Yeah.
comment. Briefly, you know, I think your son had to have these nightmares to wake him up. There are things that happen in our lives that are meant to stir us. Knowing that really, because we're stirred, we're not really hurt. We're not really, you know, going to suffer necessarily because of them. But these things wake us up, just like you had to be awakened through him for change.
That's right. Everyone gets a different wake-up call.
That's right.
I think we could probably continue this for about another hour or two. So I think we'll continue it at Ruby's. You'll join us there. Please don't forget that next month is David Kessler, who is an incredible person.